When I was 10 months old, I had meningitis, which rendered my retina and my optic nerves dead. And this meant that my eyesight had kind of more or less gone. My parents obviously were very disappointed when they heard that their son was blind. But then, credit to them, they decided to invest in me rather than just look at how they could get my blindness revived. So they made sure that I had good education. They sent me to the best schools that they could afford. I passed out from St. Stephen's College and did mathematics honors, did my MA from Delhi University, and then started a career in advertising. So after spending about 10 years in advertising, I had the opportunity of visiting a blind school for the first time. And that is when I realized how lucky I was. Because my parents had given me great education, great opportunities, great exposure. And the blind students who were there in that school were literally struggling. They were languishing in substandard quality. The building was poor, the curriculum was diluted, the professionals working there, their competency were questionable. And that is when I decided that I must do something with people like me. Of course, I had never been to a blind school before. I had not met very many visually impaired people in my life before except myself. So I didn't really know what was the kind of work that was being done in the country. So I decided to travel. I quit my advertising job, started doing freelance work, and then started traveling around the country. And that was the time that I visited Dehradun. And I was staying at the National Institute for the Visually Handicapped, which is the top body, the government body, which works with people who are visually impaired. And I was in their guest house, and one morning I woke up to the sound of cricket commentary. I heard a voice kind of saying, Kapil Dev moves into bowl to Sunil Gavaskar. So when I went out and went close to the ground where the play was happening, I found a group of blind children playing cricket, and the wicketkeeper was the commentator. And he was enjoying himself. What I found was the bowling was underarm, and it was quite accurate, quite fast. The batting was quite skillful, and the fielding was quite athletic. And when I spoke to the umpire, who was the physical training instructor, about what this game was all about, and I was told that blind kids, not only in Dehradun, but all over India, in different schools for the blind, actually play this improvised form of game. The ball was made of hard white plastic. It had ball bearings inside, and it rattled when it moved, and the bowling was underarm, as I said. So this game, I realized, could add tremendous value to the life of blind people, because the sporting arena is like a classroom. You learn a lot of things on the playing field. You learn teamwork, you learn leadership, you learn competitive spirit, strategy planning. You learn to take on different emotions of life, whether it is win, defeat, you learn to cope with life. So it's a powerful medium to project talent and ability. And I also realized that this game could be taken to the international stage. So I was made up, my mind was made up that I will promote cricket for the blind. So I started off in 1990 as organizing the first ever national cricket tournament for the blind. And 19 teams participated, and the tournament was a great success in terms of participation, in terms of enjoyment, in terms of what people gained by it. There was a lot of engagement, and this became an annual feature. So these activities carried on. 92, 91, we had it in Bangalore, 92, 93. In 93, in Ahmedabad, I announced that we will organize the first ever World Cup in 1998. And then everybody started clapping. It was a big announcement, and there was a lot of excitement in the air. In 1996 it was when we set up what is called the World Blind Cricket Council. We had a conference in Delhi where we invited the representatives of organizations involved with cricket for the blind in different parts of the world, brought them all together around the table. You see, the game was played differently in each country. So there was need to actually standardize the rules of play, standardize the equipment that was used. So 2 days of hardcore negotiation, hardcore discussions, we decided that the Indian ball would be used, which is the size of a regular cricket ball, much lighter, of course. It's a white plastic ball. That would be used. The rules were standardized, and it was decided that in 1998, the first ever World Cup of cricket for the blind would be played in India at New Delhi. So 1998, the World Cup actually happened. Mr. K.R. Narayanan, who was then the President of India, came as the chief guest for the finals, and he gave away the prizes to South Africa, who won the World Cup, defeating Pakistan in the finals. India had won every match of the tournament, but in the semi-finals they had a bad day as they call it, and we lost to South Africa. So India were out of the tournament. So this cricket for the blind became very popular. Every year we had the national tournament. 4 years later, we had a second World Cup which happened in Chennai. It was 2002. And the third year, the World Cup was organized in Pakistan, in Islamabad, which Pakistan beat India in the finals. In 2007, I just felt that I had made my contribution. The game was being played. There was an administrative body at the global level, the World Blind Cricket Council. So I decided to hand over the baton of promoting cricket for the blind to a younger group of people who continued to run the show. And in 2014, India won the World Cup for the first time when it beat Pakistan in the finals when the World Cup was played in South Africa. So, and that is, I felt very thrilled about it, basically because Mr. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, invited the Indian team when they came back from South Africa for a cup of tea and felicitated the team. The President of India felicitated the team. The media houses called the team for interviews. And so a dream that had started with me in 1990 seemed to have come to a stage where it was beginning to be recognized. And the icing on the cake now is that BCCI just announced that they are going to make an annual grant or a 5-year grant to cricket for the blind, cricket for the deaf, and so on and so forth. So I think the game will proceed. Through cricket, I traveled across the country, across the world, met different kinds of people, met a lot of visually impaired people in different parts of India, met their family members, met people from the society, met people from the government, corporate houses, people from the sporting arena, and one thing came through, and that was that blindness was not the real problem. It was the way people think. Nazar mein problem nahi hai, nazariya mein hai. So I felt it was important to address the issue of nazariya, because if you want to change the way people look at blind people, the nazariya has to change. And how do you change nazariya? By sharing information, sharing knowledge. And what I also realized was that there are a number of visually impaired people who have had good education and good exposure. They are into mainstream activity. There are blind people who run travel companies. There are blind people who are in the IT business. There are journalists who are visually impaired. There are lawyers who are visually impaired. There are physiotherapists who are visually impaired. So if these people could be performing professionally in the mainstream, why can't every blind person do the same? I believe every blind person in this country is potentially part of the human resource of this country. They must be invested in, not merely provided for. So keeping this in mind, we launched a project called Eyeway. Eyeway is a knowledge resource on living life with blindness. So we started off with a website in 2004, and we gathered information on different aspects of living life with blindness. In 2005, we launched a radio program called Eyeway, Ye Hai Roshni Ka Karwan. And this was broadcast across the country on Vivid Bharati. And we started getting calls. So we felt that we needed to have a helpline. So we hired a couple of visually impaired people, trained them, and got them to answer these calls. And we were getting at least 8 to 10 calls a day. In a week, we got close to 60 to 70 calls. And in about 10 to 12 years, we answered nearly 15,000 different queries. Queries would have to do with education. There were some queries to do with career guidance. There were counseling queries. This would assure that the program is sustained. There are 62 million blind people in India. Every blind person could be reached with information that could change the way they look at life, change the way they live life. Be remembered for good.